Life on the ocean is not for the faint of heart. Or maybe it's only for those with no heart left. Most sailors and fishermen take to the sea purely as a means to survive, to keep food on the table, a roof over their families' heads. But the longer they're out there, the more it calls to them. It doesn't just sustain them, it claims them. Some, possibly driven to madness, only find solace in the cold embrace of the ocean's depths, as if something was telling them to return home. The coast near Crescent Peak was always known for foggy days, but it would never be as thick as it was in the north near Innsmouth. There was never really a need for a lighthouse either, as the shores were not rocky nor dangerous to approach. Soft sand littered the beaches of this port town. The cold water is what kept the people away, though. In this area, it was common for the temperatures to stay around -4 degrees Celsius. The people here made do. They continued with their mundane lives and complicit mindsets, content with the monotony a small port town provides. Nary an issue would arise with their fishing endeavors. However, over the last few years, the abundance in their catches seemed to deteriorate steadily. It was to the point the fishermen began moving further north in hopes of finding all they needed. This mistake would haunt the town for generations to come. These waters have always been a mystery to even the most veteran of sailors. Those sailors that lived to old age would always berate youngins to be careful of the sea, that she will swallow you whole if you lose yourself. Of course, no one paid any mind, as these old men were typically drunkards and vagrants. All but one. Captain Woodruff, possibly the oldest living sailor in this part of Massachusetts. He had sailed this coast more times than most of these new bloods would ever hope to sail. He was rugged, stoic, and most of all, he was sane. He spoke with a low hum, kept to himself, and only warned people of the dangers of the ocean if they were trifling with the uncertainty that comes with stepping foot off of solid ground. It was him who warned the newest sailors to be wary of what they would find out there in the fog. Though while you may be tempted to learn more, curiosity will kill a man faster than a knife to the heart. In the spring of '98, 3 fishing trawlers vanished just off the coast of Massachusetts. The weather was clear, the seas were calm, and the equipment was functioning. No distress call, no flare, nothing. It would be a few weeks until a single vessel was recovered, the Bellwether, found adrift 15 miles east of Crescent Peak. The crew completely gone. The lanterns were still warm, rum was left untapped, and the radio hissed with static so loud it apparently burst the onboard speakers. The ship's logbook had entries up until the hour before last correspondence. Then it descended into madness. Names scratched out, ink bled through like something wet was pressing on the paper, and one phrase repeated itself in increasingly illegible scrawl. She hums in the fog.
Jackals, a lot of them.
I had arrived a day prior and began my investigation promptly by first acquainting myself with the townsfolk. The news of the missing trawlers simply stumbled into my lap due to my incessant nature to know all about the latest developments in biodegradable fuel, and it was the missing boats that stagnated the supply of fish oil to Dianide Co. that caught my attention. You see, the issue with biodegradable fuel is that it's intended to be used as soon as it's prepared, since, with the immediate release, the deterioration process begins. This allows a 72-hour time frame for which the fuel can be truly used. Great for quick trips and when you need to be on the go. But that's besides the point. There were 3 separate crews that just vanished without a trace, and on top of that, I found myself back in Massachusetts once again. Efficiency was of the essence, because the last thing I need is Dupard breathing down my neck again. After some deliberation with fellow law enforcement officers, I figured my next course of action was to reach out to some of the fishermen's family to learn a little about these men. First on my list, McKenna Clarence. 24 years old, married to Isaac Clarence for the last 3 years, 2 kids, ages 4 and 3. Isaac took a job as a deckhand on the Bellwether just before his first child was born. Their house resided at the end of a crook road, a small abode. It felt old, but it wasn't run down. It definitely had seen better days, as the saltwater air has been eating at the frame all around. If I hadn't been raised near the coast myself, I probably would have been afraid to step foot in the building. Never know if one wrong step could bring the entire thing down. McKenna stood in the frame of the kitchen, eyes low to the ground, and she spoke in a hushed voice, almost as if she was afraid someone would hear her. All I could decipher through her short breaths and stifled tears were, "I miss him. I didn't want this. I can't do this alone." She was no help. As soon as one of the kids stepped into the room to investigate what was going on, she broke down completely. So I excused myself from their home, not wanting to bring any more sorrow than what they've already experienced. I made my way to several other homes, and each one ended up essentially the same. The family would be a mess. Hushed whispers of regret and pain would seep into the conversation, and after a few minutes of questions, they would break down, unable to continue. Why did they all hold regret, though? The way each of them spoke, they felt lost, disconnected, almost as if they had wished for these things to happen. I sat at the bar as I compiled my notes, hoping that maybe I could pick up some additional information from the regulars. Nothing but nonsense and unintelligible sea shanties filled the night. As I woke the next day, there was a stillness in the air that not even the coastal breeze could shake. The fog had already enveloped the whole town, making it hard to even see a few feet in front of me. I decided to find Wyndham, the local radio operator. As I entered the station, a loud whirring seemed to deafen all else.
Who's there? What do you want?
I presume you're Wyndham?
I've been most of my life. I take it you're the detective looking into the vanished?
I am. I've been told you were in contact with them as it happened.
That's a fact. They were checking in as the line became dull and suddenly cut entirely. All that was left was static. A few weeks later, the boat showed up.
Was there any sign at all that could tell of what might have happened that day?
Well, can't really explain it, but before the line began to distort, the static had already started. Nothing unusual about that normally, but those noises, they didn't sound electrical.
What exactly do you mean?
It sounded like voices, singing almost, but not like any song you could imagine. I felt every muscle in my old body tense up when it began.
Wyndham, has anyone else heard singing in these last few days? Wyndham hadn't said anything to anyone aside from myself about the singing, and I needed to find out immediately if a single soul in this town had heard anything similar since the disappearances began. As I made my way to the main road, it was completely deserted. The fog was still thick as it was this morning, but none of the vagabonds that littered the street were anywhere to be seen. Suddenly, a shrill pierced the air like a bullet whizzing by. Before I even realized it, I was running toward the sound. As I darted between buildings and down alleys, the fog seemed to move with me, almost as if it was leading me toward my destination. After a few minutes, I had reached the docks, and the air fell silent. Only the gentle lapping of the tide against the wooden beams surrounded me. As I approached closer, I saw a figure standing at the edge of the pier with their back toward me. A woman with long black hair, drenched from the sea mist. I couldn't see her face from where I stood, and as I began to approach, the boards creaking ever so softly under my weight, she began to hum. It wasn't a tune I could recall, nor a melody that made any sense. It just sounded like noise. I was about 10 feet away when I recognized that it was McKenna. And as I reached out, attempting to speak, she took a step off the pier and disappeared underneath the surface of the water. If I didn't know any better, it was almost like the ocean opened a door for her. There was no splash, no scream, no fear. It seemed almost like acceptance. She never resurfaced. I stood there for what felt like hours. She was gone, her singing replaced by the hum of the ocean's wave, a hum I was all too familiar with. My trance broke when a bell began to toll from the center of town. I quickly took off in that direction for fear of what else could be transpiring here. Shouting could be heard as I drew closer.
"Repent! We have forsaken the sea! She lays claim to our souls on this blessed day."
A young sailor was tolling the bell and screaming like a madman. As the scene became clear, I watched as two officers tackled the young man to the ground as he continued his delusion. Albeit, he may not be wrong. As the square began to fill with people, panic began to ensue, as folks began asking questions as to where so-and-so was and if anyone had seen him or her. A young girl could be heard through the commotion asking when her mom would return from the ocean. I stopped an officer briefly asking if the speakers of the boat were still playing when it was brought into the port. He simply stated,
"We couldn't get the blasted thing to turn off. Kept the entire town awake for several hours that night."
This was the worst possible thing I could have heard that day. The air around us began to tighten, like the fog was trying to suffocate each and every one of us. Panic was setting in around everyone, and even I could not escape the pressure in my chest. A siren song has been played, and this town is now on a timer. I raced to the market to gather whatever fish bones and dried ginger I could acquire, and I began prepping an elixir that should stifle any hallucinations to those who inhale it. "You're gonna need way more than that." A searing pain of anticipation raced down my spine as I turned to find Captain Woodruff staring directly into my eyes with a knowing gaze. "They're being called upon. I know none of them are strong enough to resist it. I've seen even the most weathered of sailors be consumed by them." "Have you heard the song yourself?" "I hear it every time I close my eyes." "I've only heard stories of people whose fates remain secure on firm land after hearing these beasts." "You realize Wyndham's station has the radio from the bellwether still playing that blasted song. And yet here you are looking out for others instead of being wrought with your own guilt. I guess you could say I have a pretty strong sense of justice. Or there's more that you are unaware of than you truly realize." Before I could even respond, screaming erupted from outside. I dashed into the fog and could hear people shouting in the distance. A young boy was running, screaming for help. I grabbed hold of him and asked what's going on.
"They're all being eaten by the ocean."
It's already begun. By the time I reached the beach, I could already see dozens of townsfolk knee-deep in the calm waves of the sea, all of them simply walking in a straight line to their own demise, and I was running out of time. In a haste, I scrambled to find any sort of flammable liquid. As I scanned the landscape, I spotted 2 barrels nearby, and when I checked each of them, they were both filled with liquid gold at the ready. I popped both lids and rolled them toward the water's edge. And as I did so, I tore a piece of my jacket off and jammed it into the elixir's phial. I quickly lit it with my lighter and tossed the makeshift cocktail into the pooling, biodegradable fuel that was mixing with the seawater. The combustion was quiet and quick. The fire caused the evaporation of the fuel, which released a noxious odor that swiftly dispersed across the beach. Within moments, all those in the vicinity seemingly came to their senses and in a panic ran away from the ocean. I stood there, scanning the shore for any additional people who may need any further help, and I felt a presence berating me off in the distance. For a brief moment, the fog thinned out, and my eyes locked on to the glare of one of those beasts. Its sickly green skin and bulbous back peeked itself over the ocean's surface as the gnarled fin that stemmed from its head down to its spine began to vibrate with an animosity I haven't felt in decades. Bubbles formed near its mouth as if it tried to say something to me. and it slipped beneath the waves. All I could do was stand there and prepare myself for whatever was about to come.